Good afternoon, everyone. This is L.A. State, a political news show covering local and state issues affecting Cal State L.A. students. I am your host, Joe Brzalera.
And I'm your host, Jasmine Figueroa. Today's
topic is the December 5th runoff election for California's 51st State Assembly District. Our last episode featured interviews with many of the candidates running in a special election to fill a vacancy left by former Assemblyman Jimmy Gomez. Voters decided on October 3rd. Now candidates Wendy Carrillo and Luis Lopez will face off in a runoff election after receiving the highest number of votes.
We're going to give you some background on the race, the district, and what this will mean in Sacramento.
We're also going to hear from the candidates themselves in interviews conducted before the special election. So thanks for tuning in. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to Golden Eagle Radio.
Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio. Cal State Golden Eagle Radio.
And we're back. The show is LA State. The station is Golden Eagle Radio. Today we're talking about the runoff election for California's 51st Assembly District.
On December 5th, California State Assembly District 51 will be having a runoff election to fill a vacancy left by newly sworn-in Congressman Jimmy Gomez, who formerly represented the district. Assembly District 51 has a minority-majority population, with over 70% of residents being Latino. Whites make up roughly 11%, and Asians constitute nearly 14% of the district. The median household income for the district is about $42,000 annually, and 25% live under the poverty line. The district is a hotbed for gentrification, encompassing communities like Silver Lake, Echo Park, and Chinatown, which have all seen an influx of affluent residents and commercial investment over recent years. It is also a district highly involved in the current immigration debate. Some 25% of residents have non-citizen status.
Out of a field of 13 candidates, Wendy Carrillo and Luis Lopez were the top vote earners. As of October 6th, the Secretary of State's website reported Carrillo with 22% and Lopez with 18.8%. Mike Fong was third with 16.2%, and Gabriel Sandoval placed a distant fourth with 10.5% of the vote.
Jimmy Gomez, who had refrained from endorsing a candidate during the special election, announced the day after the election that he would be endorsing Wendy Carrillo as his replacement. In a written statement announcing the endorsement, Gomez said Carrillo is, quote, a proven working-class progressive who understands that she must represent everyone in the 51st District. With the Trump administration continuing to target our communities, I know Wendy will be a champion for our families in the fight for quality education, better health care, affordable housing, high-wage jobs, and protecting our most vulnerable residents, including women, seniors, and immigrants. And end of quote.
Voter turnout was very low in the race. Early results show that a little under 8% of registered voters in Assembly District 51 voted in this election. For perspective, the difference in votes between Carrillo and Lopez was only 685 votes.
Assembly District 51 is solidly Democrat, with only 9% of registered voters identifying as Republican.
There were no Republicans in the October 3rd election, and both Carrillo and Lopez are Democrats. No matter the outcome on December 3rd, Democrats will be reinforcing their supermajority in the Assembly, with 55 seats out of 80 in the lower chamber.
What does supermajority mean?
Supermajority refers to a majority whereby one party possesses two-thirds of a particular legislative body. Democrats possess supermajorities in both houses of the California legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate. A supermajority allows Democrats to raise taxes without coordinating with Republicans and make use of an urgency clause, which allows laws to be enacted immediately. They can also place measures on statewide ballots and can override a veto by the governor. As we said in the last episode, this election was dominated by progressive issues such as healthcare, immigrants' rights, and LGBTQ rights. Most candidates represented themselves as progressive Democrats, with many pulling from their personal backgrounds to do so. Carrillo, for instance, spoke often of her undocumented status growing up. She came to the country when she was a child from El Salvador and didn't become a citizen until her early 20s. Likewise, Luis Lopez is an openly gay man whose advocacy for LGBTQ rights is a focal point of his campaign.
When we come back, we'll hear interviews with Luis Lopez and Wendy Carrillo, candidates for Assembly District 51. You're listening to LA State on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio.
As an 18-year-old, I let my mistakes kind of take over my life. I was zero point 0.5 credits away from completing high school, and I didn't do it. When I found out that I was pregnant, I know that I had to do something for myself if I wanted to make her a better person and provide a better life for her. My family never stopped pushing for me to be better because they knew what I could become and who I could become as a person. My support team is amazing. The educational director here, my sister, and even my 7-year-old daughter has just been more than the support that I could ask for.
And to see you makes me proud.
I've been given an opportunity, and I'm just thankful for it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back. You're listening to LA State on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio. As we said earlier, the top two candidates from October 3rd special election were Luis Lopez and Wendy Carrillo. Wendy Carrillo is an LA-based journalist. She was the executive producer and host of Knowledge is Power, a radio show on Power 106 that focused on social justice issues. Along with her journalism background, Ms. Carrillo also worked in a communications role for the very powerful Service Employees International Union. Ms. Carrillo secured the union's endorsement for this election and received significant financial backing from them. I asked Wendy what her main objective would be if elected to office.
Well, I think it's impossible to just simply have one. There are so many issues that impact our district and our state, and the way that California policy goes, so does the country. And so if I were to say one objective, it would be to be a progressive, bold voice in Sacramento that understands the needs of my community and my district, which include strong unions and good jobs, good paying jobs, access to great schools, access to health care, protecting women's rights and environmental justice. These are all issues that are correlated. So you can't, when you address issues of homelessness, for example, you can't talk about homelessness without talking about mental health. And you can't talk about that unless you're also talking about veterans issues and the VA and families and education and healthcare. So it's all related. And I think intersectional work is what's needed, and we need to look at it through a more holistic approach.
Luis Lopez is a self-described movement progressive. He is currently a board member for Planned Parenthood Los Angeles. Some of his past roles include president of the East Area Planning Commission and the social science analysis for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Lopez has secured much of his campaign funding from medical organizations, such as the California Hospital Association and the California Association of Physicians Groups, along with Planned Parenthood Los Angeles. Luis cited healthcare access as his main objective if elected.
We have been, as you know, struggling with this issue at the federal level and even at the state level for many, many years. And we have an administration that is hell-bent on completely dismantling the progress that we've made through Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. We've made tremendous gains. Here in California, we're a model of this expansion of healthcare through the Affordable Care Act. It is not perfect by any stretch. We have many challenges, and I've been at the front lines of some of those challenges through my work now more recently at the City of Hope, which is an NCI-designated cancer center. But over the many years, almost 2 decades of work with safety net providers like Ultimate Health Services and through other community clinics, there are challenges to getting to specialty care. There are challenges insofar as the low reimbursement rate for Medi-Cal providers. And so we need to make sure that we can stabilize our insurance market here in California, that we have providers willing to take Medi-Cal populations, that the quality of care for Medi-Cal is at par with other insurance types. And so we need to make sure that we improve upon the system and that we move in the direction of of universal coverage. We've been talking about single payer, and I think that that's certainly the direction that we're seeing our system move in. We need to look at how best to implement that. We've seen some challenges in this initial bill, SB 562.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So SB 5, we'll just jump right into that one really quickly. SB 562 recently was stalled in the Assembly. SB 562, the bill Mr. Lopez referenced, would have provided universal access to health care for all residents of California and would have dissolved insurance providers. It was shelved by Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon. Earlier in the season, we heard from Republican State Senator Joel Anderson, who voted against the bill. Like many of its opponents, which include both Democrats and Republicans, Senator Anderson argued the bill did not do enough to provide a funding mechanism for the new system. Mr. Lopez argued that while the details of such a sweeping reform are complex and have yet to be determined, providing universal healthcare access is an important and tenable goal. Where there is a will, there is a way, as Mr. Lopez sees it. Ms. Carrillo also supported the bill. Here she is responding to the criticism of a lack of funding mechanism attached to the bill.
I would need to look at those details a little bit more closely, to be honest, and I would want to build a coalition of various different groups to bring to the table to actually have that conversation. And I've been having that conversation now that I'm running for office, including conversations with the firefighters and other labor organizations and other stakeholders in terms of what it would mean and how it would get it done, and really how do we ensure that all workers are protected and that we are moving in the right direction, and that the details, not only in the funding, but the details of how it would work would be flushed out. So you're talking about, you know, not only health care for all Californians, but health care for public sector workers, government employees, police officers, firefighters, teachers. Like, this is a very complicated matter that deserves more attention and more detail.
Both candidates have formally run against Jimmy Gomez, whose seat they are looking to fill. Mr. Lopez ran against him in 2012 for the Assembly, and Ms. Carrillo ran against him recently in a special election for the U.S. House of Representatives. I asked them how they rated their former opponent's tenure in the Assembly. First, Mr. Lopez.
As we saw in his election for Congress, he did quite well. I was proud to support him and endorse him, and I think we need to continue to move our state in the direction of progressive, bold leadership, especially in this urban district, which is such an incredibly diverse district, all the way from East L.A. to Eagle Rock, where I live, Silver Lake. It's a very diverse district, and I think its representation needs to be well prepared and progressive and ready for the challenges ahead.
Ms. Carrillo.
I think Congressman Gomez was a progressive and will continue to be a progressive now in his role as our congressional member, and I think he led the way in a lot of the fights in the state assembly. I appreciate his work with labor. He comes from labor, much like I do, and is a progressive champion for working families, for labor unions, for women, for children, for pay equity, and really focusing on issues that impact our community. And I hope that I will be able to follow in those footsteps.
An obvious issue of great importance to us here at Cal State L.A. is tuition costs. I asked the candidates if they had a solution to rising tuition costs. How do you balance affordable tuition with adequate pay for teachers and administrative costs? Here's Ms. Carrillo.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a proud alumni of Cal State LA, and I was very proud and honored to have been invited to the opening ceremony of Golden Eagle Radio. So that was about a year and a half ago or so, something like that. And even when I was in college at Cal State LA, we had increased tuitions, and that was under Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we had a group of students go up to Sacramento, myself included, and lobby the governor and lobby his office here in Santa Monica as well, and continue to fight against these hikes. And I think the solution now, as I look back, I graduated from Cal State L.A. in 2005, so close to 12 years ago. And now I'm running for an assembly seat to represent this very district where Cal State L.A. is and where I grew up. I grew up in City Terrace. And I'm a first-generation college student, first one in my family to go to college, first one to try to pave the way. And what I want to do is work on what many people call reforming Prop 13. Prop 13 went into effect in the late 70s. So Prop 13 has made it so that corporations aren't paying their fair share. And there's been many attempts to try to revise this, and it's failed because there's a lack of courage in the state legislature because it's one of those issues that no one wants to touch. But if we were to do that, if we were to reform Prop 13, we'd actually have more money for school. We'd have more money for education. We have more money for students. We have more money for resources and teachers so that K through 12 was funded, but that we are also funding higher education, which I think is incredibly important and obviously needed. And students can't continue to be, the tuition can't continue to be the way in which the budget is balanced.
Here's Mr. Lopez.
I believe that we need to fund adequately. We need to have adequate funding for our colleges and universities so that folks can access higher ed. Folks can actually get through the process. And so that means making sure that the state invests. And we need to look at every possible avenue to make sure that those resources are made available. And that includes looking at some bold proposals, like we've talked many years about oil severance tax, for instance, like we have in other states. And so I think as we look at the challenges, not only in terms of education, but our housing crunch and the affordability crisis, this is going to require, and healthcare, we just talked about healthcare as well. The costs there in our current system are unsustainable. So the drivers here in terms of the demand and the investment is significant, and we're going to need to look to bold solutions to make sure that we have adequate revenue for our universities.
When we get back, I'm going to talk with Luis Lopez and Wendy Carrillo, candidates for California Assembly District 51, about bills recently passed and debated in the legislature. Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon called this one of the most progressive legislative sessions in recent memory. We're going to hear how the two feel about it. You're listening to LA State on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio.
At Barlow Respiratory Hospital, we believe in care, compassion, and hope. We thank our doctors and all who dedicate so much to medicine and healing on National Doctors Day and every day. Barlow Respiratory Hospital specializes in ventilator weaning and is the only nonprofit respiratory hospital in California. Happy Doctor's Day from Barlow Respiratory Hospital. www.barlowhospital.org.
And we're back. Immigration was a huge issue during the special election. The legislature recently passed SB 54, known as the Sanctuary State Bill. The bill bars state and local officials from helping the federal government enforce immigration. It prohibits state and local resources from being used to investigate, interrogate, detain, detect, or arrest persons for immigration enforcement purposes. Both Mr. Lopez and Ms. Carrillo strongly supported the bill. Protection for undocumented immigrants was central to Ms. Carrillo's campaign. Protections for undocumented immigrants are central to Ms. Carrillo's campaign. She herself was an undocumented immigrant, having immigrated from El Salvador as a child before receiving citizenship in her 20s.
I feel very strongly about SB 54 and ensuring that our undocumented communities feel safe. I'm formally undocumented. I came to this country when I was 5, and between the ages of 5 and 13, I had no legal status, and my family fled a civil war in El Salvador. And we were fortunate to have received residency when I was 13, and I became a citizen when I was in my early 20s. And California is the biggest recipient of DACA students that trusted in their government to do the right thing and are now very afraid of being on a list to potentially be deported, detained and deported. I believe that parents that come into this country seeking a better opportunity for themselves and for their families should not be criminalized, and we should be able, and our families should be able to call on the police or call on the sheriff if they are reporting a crime without having to fear that police officer or that sheriff is going to ask for their legal status. That is not how we continue to have safe communities. That actually does the opposite of that. And so I wish that the bill were stronger, but I'm glad that something is there that exists that protects families.
I asked Mr. Lopez how he would respond to an opponent of undocumented immigration who might claim that undocumented immigrants are a drain on government resources.
Well, I would say that history tells us otherwise. History tells us that immigrants are a driving economic force. They invest in businesses and new businesses. They're incredibly important to our economy. And we know that many of them take jobs that otherwise go unfilled because it's tough work. And I think we need to remember that we are a country of immigrants and support our immigrant communities. It's very important that we do that in the State Assembly and at every level of government.
One bill that received national attention was the Gender Recognition Act. The bill makes it easier for people to change their gender status on birth certificates and state identification. It also establishes for the first time a non-binary option. Rights for LGBTQ individuals is of personal significance to Luis Lopez. An openly gay man, Mr. Lopez has spent much of his career advocating for the LGBTQ community. In 2005, he built and ran the Latino Coalition Against AIDS, as well as co-founding Honor PAC, the first political action committee geared specifically for gay Latinos. Here he is on the Gender Recognition Act.
Absolutely, I supported it. I think that we have always in the state, or of late, been provided leadership role to making sure that the LGBT community and the trans community is supported. And I think we need to do everything that we can, especially, again, under this administration, that we lead to make sure that we have full equality and protections for the LGBT and trans community. I have worked over many, many years, since I was a college student, to make sure that we have the protections, the support. Back in the day, in the midst of the HIV/AIDS crisis, growing up, it was just an absolute necessity to make sure that we as a community supported one another and fought together for equality. And we've made a lot of progress, but we need to continue on this journey to make sure that we protect all of our citizens, and certainly the LGBT community has been very special and very, for me, very important. As an openly LGBT man, as the founder and first president of the Honor PAC, which is the LGBT Latino political action committee that I helped found, I will continue to be a champion.
Ms. Carrillo also strongly supported the act.
I think it's a great approach for people that are gender nonconforming, for people that are going through a very deep and personal change on how they want to be recognized. And everyone should have a right to live the life that they want to lead. And, I think I want to give a shout out to all of our trans brothers and sisters and the LGBTQ community who have undergone a lot of changes in their own movement, and to continue to this day to be attacked for simply being who they are and loving who they love. And I think this is a bold new step for California.
A $52 billion transportation plan was passed, which will increase taxes on gasoline and diesel, as well as institute a new vehicle fee dependent upon the value of the car. The taxes will go to pay for road repair and public transit funding. Again, both candidates favored it. Here's Mr. Lopez.
We need to continue to invest in our infrastructure, and our roads are incredibly important to our economy, to our everyday life. And we've heard all the concern and opposition to this in various gas tax. Nobody likes the taxes. We understand that, and at the same time, we need to invest and make sure that we have accountability. That is absolutely important, because when taxpayers feel that we have that these resources are not being properly used or invested, that's a legitimate concern. So it is incumbent upon us as office holders and as the state government to make sure that we display proper stewardship of our resources. And I think that's the challenge that we need to live up to. And but I do support it, and I think that we'll be well served by it.
Opponents labeled the bill the gas tax and claimed it was a job killer. Here's Ms. Carrillo responding to this portrayal.
Well, I think that it's very easy to throw the words around, those words around. But I think our state, our city, we need infrastructure, we need road repair. None of that is a job killer. That's actually a job creator. We're putting people out there to work, especially good union jobs. And the truth is that we need that. We need to have infrastructure. We need road repair. We need to figure out a more robust transportation system so that we're not relying solely on our vehicles to get from point A to point B. And that requires, that we think outside the box and that we figure out a way to do it as a state.
A package of bills were passed that were aimed at addressing affordable housing. As a few examples, SB 2 creates a $225 fee on certain real estate transactions, which is expected to generate $200 to $300 million a year to aid in affordable housing projects. SB 3 is a housing bond that goes up for voter approval in November of 2018. If approved, the bond will provide $3 billion for low-income housing and another $1 billion for home loans for military veterans. SB 35 makes it faster and cheaper for developers to build once they've met city zoning requirements by forcing local municipalities to expedite the process in order to meet state-set housing goals. Both candidates supported the measure while acknowledging there is more work to do. Here's Ms. Carrillo.
I think they're needed. It's a step in the right direction to address the issues that many of us are feeling in the 51st District in terms of having jobs that don't pay enough to pay for the rent that continues to go up. And so we need affordable housing, we need housing for homeless, we need housing for vets, we need senior housing, we need not only affordable housing, but low-income housing, which is different, as well as senior housing. So all steps in the right direction.
I asked her if she believed rent control should be expanded, as many tenants' rights and affordable housing advocates have demanded.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, our community is facing a lot of issues when it comes to housing. There is certainly a crisis. I think renters need to be protected. I've spoken to local the city council members of Los Angeles to try to figure out what on the municipal side is being done to protect renters, but not only renters for apartments or singles, but also small businesses. I was living in Highland Park where I saw local businesses that have been there for decades lose their location because there are no protections for small businesses. If you own a building and you have the front side of your building as a small business, the landowner can increase your rent as much as he or she wants, and there aren't any protections against that. And so I think that the city council needs to work with community to try to figure that out. I think that that's something that we should definitely consider. Absolutely. There should be some protection. There should be some protections for small businesses that are really the when you're walking down your street, it really is what builds community. Being able to go into a local panaderia or a local bakery or a local pet shop and know that this is a small business owner, their family relies on this business and gets to know the neighbors, and for them to be priced out without any protections isn't a benefit to the community. And so I understand there is a need, of course, to want to bring in new businesses. Of course, who doesn't want that? But what are we doing to protect the current livelihood of people and the atmosphere and culture and environment that is created with small businesses?
Mr. Lopez takes a measured stance on housing, arguing for a balance of affordability and continued development of our housing supply.
We didn't get here overnight, and we didn't get here in 1 year, and it's going to take some significant time for us to really make a dent in our housing crisis and the affordability crisis that we're seeing. I think we'll need to continue to look at how we invest in affordable and low-income housing, and we need to explore every avenue, both in terms of having the carrots and the sticks, to make sure that we encourage municipalities and developers to build out additional homes and housing that is affordable at all income levels. I think certainly we see that NIMBYism is also a major issue when it comes to stopping developments. And I'll tell you, as president of the East Area Planning Commission for 5 years, I've seen these battles and how they play out firsthand. And it's a balancing act. Certainly we need to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods and the unique architectural neighborhoods that we have, the housing stock that we have. But we have to make sure that we are committed to increasing the supply of housing where appropriate. And we've seen these battles play out in the city of Los Angeles at the ballot box as well with Measure S. But we're going to have to continue to have this dialogue and continue to seek out every opportunity, whether it's infill, whether it's repurposing land for housing, because it's critically needed.
He uses the term NIMBYism, which refers to the phrase, "not in my backyard." This would describe residents who reject proposals which may be necessary, but which are opposed due to their proximity to the opponent's immediate living space. We'll be back after this. You're listening to LA State on Cal State LA's Golden Eagle Radio.
Steven.
Who said that?
Me, down here.
Ugh, what are you, a yellow booger?
I'm a banana slug, Steven.
What are you doing in my room?
I'm your sense of adventure. It's been a long time since we've had an adventure in the forest.
Mom took me to the forest last year.
I'm a slug, Steven. It took me a long time to get here.
You're right. I should get out.
Yeah, the forest is not that far away.
Hey, Mom!
Come to the forest where the more adventurous you lives. Check out discovertheforest.org for cool places nearby. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Okay, well, our time is up for today.
Thanks to Luis Lopez and Wendy Carrillo for appearing on today's show.
Thanks to our engineers Josiah Bell and Jasmine Figueroa. Special thanks to Ricky Rodas for aiding in the production of this episode.
This episode was written by Joseph Brizolera with assistance from Diego Barrera. It was produced by Joe Brizolera, music by Doug Van Rennen and Ryan Sutera. I'm Jasmine Figueroa.
And I'm Joe Brizolera.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
This is LA State, real media for real students. You're listening to Golden Eagle Radio.